We welcome on a very, very special guest of Macrodosing. You guys are probably familiar with his work. I know I am. We've talked about some of the work that you've done on this show as well. Kind of a recurring theme on this program. It is Chris Hansen. He's got a new show out, Takedown with Chris Hansen on True Blue. And you're also doing a podcast, Predators I Have Caught, the podcast. You probably know him best from To Catch a Predator. It's kind of what puts you on the national map as far as a lot of people are concerned. So tell us real quick about Takedown with Chris Hansen, the new show. How does that relate? We talked a little bit before we started taping. How does that relate to Catch a Predator?
Takedown is the next generation of the Predator investigation. So after 19 years, you would think, after all the publicity, all the pop culture, all the guys who've gone to prison, you would think they'd stop showing up, but that's not the case. And we have more guys showing up today, more disturbing cases than ever before. So Takedown is the latest version of the Predator investigation that's on True Blue. So we partner, collaborate with law enforcement around the country, and we set up sting operations as we always have. They've evolved, and we use most of the time decoys in law enforcement because it makes for a cleaner prosecution at the end of the day. And if these guys aren't prosecuted, then what have we done? You know, in the beginning, 19 years ago, the first investigation, we weren't sure what was going to happen. 17 guys surfaced in Long Island, New York, in 2.5 days, and they just walked right out of the sting house.
Yeah, it was more just shaming them, right?
It was shaming and exposing and educating and creating a dialogue, but only one of those guys, because he was a New York City firefighter, was prosecuted. The second investigation, more cases were prosecuted after the fact by law enforcement. After that, we have always collaborated with law enforcement.
How would that work when somebody would show up, especially early on? Because we've done, just a small amount of television here. We've done, a lot of videos for the internet. Do you have to get these guys to sign a waiver?
No, because we're a news organization. We're covering the commission of a felony. As a courtesy for entertainment programs or, a documentary, it's traditional to get a form signed, a waiver. But we don't have to do that. I mean, the guy gives up any reasonable expectation of privacy when he walks into my sting house trying to rape a child.
Yeah.
It's over.
Yeah, and it's like, if you want to sue me, then
come on,
by all means,
yeah.
let's take this to court,
right.
and we'll just further put your name out there. I may have done a bad job introducing you, but I was making a conscious effort to not say the line that you probably hear all the time. Just take a seat.
Have a seat right over there.
Why don't you have a seat right over here for me, Chris?
Yeah, South Park did it best, but yeah.
Can you say it again?
Yeah, have a seat right over there.
Yeah, it's different.
Man.
Yeah, Arian just lit up like a Christmas tree.
Arian's heard that before.
I'm saying because not in that way. So we used to have. So I don't know if you know. I mean, your show's huge, right? So it was so big. So me and I don't know if you know who this is, Maurice Jones-Drew.
Sure.
Maurice Jones-Drew. We used to watch with our Twitter family live, To Catch a Predator. What's what we,
that's
it was Sunday. I think it was that was Saturday, Sunday. I don't know. I don't remember what day it aired.
Well, originally it was on during the week, and then the original run of To Catch a Predator was on Dateline. It was originally conceived as a one-off story for Dateline. It was never conceived to be what it became. I just thought it was interesting, and when I found out about the online watchdog group Perverted Justice, I figured, well, if we could use their decoys to pose as kids online and use our ability to use enterprise journalism and wire a house with hidden cameras and microphones, it might be compelling.
Yeah.
We had no idea that it was going to turn into this.
Aaron?
I was just saying, I've always had, I may have a multiplicity of questions, but I'm going to try to keep you, we don't got you for that long. But I guess to open up, what kept, I guess the initial interest of this, what was the initial interest? Because, and this is not accusatory. This is when you look into a lot of people who help kids and church stuff like that, there's nefarious reasons around it. It's a wild, because it's a wild topic.
Sure.
And I don't mean to be accusatory, brother.
No. I totally understand where you're coming from.
It's a wild topic, and it's just the interest in it I want to know if like it's a personal vendetta, or is it just where did it come from?
Well, it came from knowing that kids were meeting adults online and getting hurt, sexually assaulted, in some cases killed. And if I had gone into the executive producer at Dateline at the time and said, look, we need to do this story, but all I have is some anecdotal scary stories, interviews, and video of people clicking on the keyboard, that's not going to cut it for what we do. And so when I heard about perverted justice, I recognized it as an opportunity to really dig in. And I've always done investigative, enterprise, sometimes hidden camera reporting around the world on different topics, all crime stuff, obviously. And so I thought this was a natural extension. Now, I didn't know if anybody was going to show up. Mm-hmm. I was on my way out to the Sting House in Long Island, wondering if I had just wasted tens of thousands of dollars of the network's money. And with that, my producer calls and said, where the hell are you? We've got 2 guys showing up in 45 minutes. And as I said, it was off to the races from that.
In a weird way, it's almost good if nobody shows up, because it's like, well, that means that there aren't bad guys trying to do bad things out there.
I only half jokingly say to my partner in True Blue, Sean Reck, that, I'm not against doing a cooking show in Italy or France or anywhere in the world. Yeah. I'm okay with that in 10 years. But I don't think that's going to happen, because you think about when we started, right? We had decoys in chat rooms on AOL and Yahoo. That was it. There was a wildfire in California. Yahoo went down. We had to stop our investigation in Georgia because we couldn't communicate with the guys we had in the queue. Now, I can't even keep up with the number of social media platforms upon which adults can meet children. Mm-hmm. And during the pandemic, for instance, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children will tell you that the number of inappropriate contacts and the transmission of inappropriate material between adults and children soared like 900%.
Yeah.
And so it's not going away. We had a guy, we did an investigation 3 or 4 weeks ago. We were in Ohio. We had a 54-year-old guy show up. He drove all the way from the Chicago area, 4.5 hours, to meet a teenage girl. I'm sitting on the couch with him. As I approach him, he says, I just was having a conversation with someone about you. It's like, come on. And he admits that he had met 2 other teenage girls with whom he had sex. And he's wearing a necklace, a friendship necklace with half a medallion that one of the girls was wearing. She had given to him. That's how good he was at grooming this child and breaking down the barriers between adults and children in society and coaxing her into an illegal sexual encounter.
That's got to be some surreal stuff when did that first start happening? When somebody would show up and recognize, and they'd be like, oh, fuck, it's Chris Hansen. That's my worst nightmare.
It was right about... It started in the 3rd investigation in Riverside County, California, because we had done Long Island. We had done Herndon, Virginia, outside of Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm. Shout out the Hornets.
Shout out the Hornets. We had a ton of high-level characters. We had a rabbi who showed up. We had a military guy. We had a guy who walked in the house naked. Special guy 29.
I saw that one.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Hard to forget that one. Yeah. And so that really started to get a lot of attention. And Fairfax County authorities prosecuted a lot of these guys. The FBI prosecuted the rabbi and the military guy. And so by the time we got to Riverside, California, which was the next investigation, we had a couple guys who had seen the show. But it wasn't until, another 6 or 7 investigations into it where guys were walking in and said, oh, you're Chris Hansen. I never miss an episode. Yeah. When I do, I download them from the internet.
So they react positively?
It's almost like a celebrity moment. I had a guy in Polk County, Florida, earlier this year. We did a sting investigation. And the guy refused to talk to detectives, but he was having a fanboy moment when I walked in. He told me everything about his fantasies about a mother-daughter encounter and all that, and just, like that serial killer sort of laugh. And just, it was
got cameras rolling, you're taking his statement. And it's all admissible in court, right?
He knows. He was excited to talk to me because it was me.
Yeah.
Do you think there's something in common with all the pedophiles you encounter, that they have some sort of, what would you say, besides, what they're there for? Do they all sort of have something that, like a personality trait?
I think they break down into 3 different categories. And again, I'm not a therapist, but in my experience, there's the hardcore heavy hitter who'd be doing this in a food court in a mall, or, he'd be a little league coach or whatever. There's a guy who is younger, one category, younger guy who's an opportunist, 19, 20, 21. She'll be older one day if it works out. It's okay. Bad, wrong, illegal, but that's his mindset. And then there's this interesting category in the middle, the professional, the doctor, the lawyer, the business guy, the coach, the military guy, a cop. We had a cop earlier this year, about a year ago, who just is predisposed to this, attracted to boys or girls, and just can't control the urge. And in spite of knowing everything, they show up at our Sting House after blurring this line between fantasy and reality. And the drive is very strong. People say, oh God, these guys are so stupid. They're not stupid. They talk about this in the chat. I could get in trouble. I could go to jail. What if this is a Chris Hansen situation? What if it's Sheriff, so-and-so, or Sheriff so-and-so, or if it's this, the feds? They know it's dangerous. They can't control the urge. And the internet has allowed this to happen. The anonymity, the addictive nature of it, the 24/7 access. These guys get to this point where they can't control the urge. Yeah. And that's when we see them.
So these guys are all bad guys. They deserve to be locked up if they're doing any sort of this behavior.
I think so. I mean, there are cases, and I've talked to therapists, where if there is an intervention, if somebody is caught at a young age and they go through the therapy and they go through the monitoring and they do everything they're supposed to do, I think that they can not reoffend. I got a letter. I encourage people who listen to the Predators I've Caught podcast to write in and send audio questions. And even if it's just an email, I read them. And a guy wrote in and said, I've been watching your show since the beginning. I have urges. I have a therapist. I have a girlfriend. And I avoid situations like chat rooms where I might be tempted. And thus far, I've never offended. But thank you for bringing this to everybody's attention in such a graphic and public way, because it's helped me to cope with it.
What about somebody?
That's what I was gonna say. I would say that was gonna be the question I had to you, because this is kind of a hot take, right? But I've always said, like, if I abuse alcohol, or if I abuse drugs, or if I abuse people, right? If I'm like, and I've known many people who have done all of that, I have a place I can go, like a refuge, right?
Sure.
And I hate to humanize pedophiles, because it's almost commonplace to say, fuck them, put them under the jail, they deserve to die. I mean, I think even Ron DeSantis is talking about doing the death penalty and stuff like that. And so I have 4 children, 1 on the way. I'm very well aware of the dangers. I understand all of that. I'm saying that, having little babies, I get it. But there's this human side of me that says, okay, if society shuns you so much that you can't even talk about it, right? As far as like the guy emails you, right? The guy emails you and he's saying, I've had urges, right? It's hard for him he has to be a very strong human being to even go and admit he's having those urges.
Absolutely.
Without the judgment and the doubt, because I look at my sexual preferences are older women.
You're the opposite of a pervert.
It's exactly
He's a different sort of predator.
Right? Yeah.
He's a cougar predator.
He gets trapped in nursing homes.
In nursing homes.
But it's like the urges. I get those urges too. Like I see an older woman, I'm like, I gotta holler at her, right? Like and so from like a sexual standpoint, because we're all sexual beings. Everybody's a sexual being. Everybody has their thing. That wiring in their brain is. Like I said, this is a hot take, because I'm hearing it. I'm like, you're enabling, and I'm trying to preface it with, I'm not enabling. I'm just trying to come at it from a preventative standpoint. So, like, what is your, I guess, take on kind of normalizing it in a way that's allowing them to act on it before it becomes assault, because it is assault.
It is assault. It's rape.
Yeah.
It's a child under a certain age, in most states it's 16, cannot give consent unless the boy is of the same age. Yes. And it varies state to state. But I think the real issue, and you do a great job of bringing this up, is that we don't have a lot of opportunities or enough opportunities for guys to get help. So if you're going to go to medical school and graduate with $250,000 of debt, and you have the choice of being a plastic surgeon 6 blocks from here on Park Avenue, or going into federal prisons every day and doing focus groups with convicted pedophiles, what are you going to do?
Yeah,
it takes a special human being, and I know them, and I've interviewed them, and they exist, and God bless them for doing the work they do. But it's tough work to sit there with 6 sex offenders in a federal prison who are going to be there for a long time and have nothing to lose, and dig into their minds and figure out, okay, you got caught for this, but how many other times did you do it?
Yeah.
And did you look at child pornography before you did it? And was there a link between the viewing of child pornography and you offending with a child? I mean, that's hard work. And it's not everybody in the medical field and the psychiatric field or even the therapy field is cut out to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's critically important that people have the ability to get treatment. Now, there's also personal responsibility. There's discipline. There are people out there who are just bad humans who will take advantage of children who are approaching the age of sexual awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a lot of what we see. I mean, this guy shows up with a backpack. The guy we talked about before, the 54-year-old, in his backpack, he's got condoms, lubricant, spermicide, Plan B pills, vape pen, and he was planning to spend the night. Now, he's an engineer, right? He's got a regular job, and he's got daughters who are around the same age as the child he was going to rape. So what do we do with that guy?
Yeah.
That's a bad human.
Premeditation. It's a lot of stuff. He's prepared.
5 hours in a car.
Yeah.
Do you believe in the death penalty for that?
That's a tough thing.
Yeah, I don't.
I mean, look, it's all right. There's no putting me on the spot. You can ask anything you want, but I think the death penalty takes it to an entirely different level in terms of a conversation of whether or not that's ever appropriate or anything else. I mean, I think there are certain people who have offended in certain horrific ways that probably deserve it, and I know people in law enforcement who are not that crazy to the right, who are pretty moderate politically, who would say that's the only way to cure some people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some guys will offend and reoffend as long as there is the opportunity to do it. So there are those who I don't think are way out there who will say, in some cases, it's deserved. And I'm not sure that I can argue against them.
There's also the conversation to be had of, in some circumstances, not all circumstances, but the people that are offending like this, they may have experienced something like that when they were a child.
I think so, but I don't think that gives pushing down. I think that happens.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many times I've been out in public, or my wife and I have been out in public, and somebody will say, "Hey, can I talk to you for a minute?" And they'll say, "Thank you for doing this, because when I was a kid, I was victimized." Or, and you sit and listen, and it's a heartfelt conversation. But it does provide, I mean, one of the reasons I think why the franchise, the series, the investigations are so compelling and they have gone on for so long is that people get a sense of justice out of it, whether they've been victimized or not. It's hard to argue against going after somebody who's attacking children.
Yeah.
So it's like, and that's the thing it's wild to me. It's a bipartisan thing, right? Nobody is against that, but you'll find the interesting part of the psychology is of it that I find, because I've thought about this a lot, because I used to watch a show and I'm like, why am I so interested in this show? And it's like the psychology behind it is fascinating, because when you look at the entirety of human history, it's only been very recent where we have kind of demonized this behavior, right? And so if we are believers in how we've evolved, and we evolved into social creatures, it's almost like this behavior has been halted in us very recently, and I won't say us, in people very recently, and the backlash from it is we did a 180. We went from, very recently there were still states that you can marry a child like at 12 years old or something like that, right? Like that was very recent on laws
in the grand scheme of history. Yeah, in some states with parental consent, there were those laws, but still, I still look at it this way. a child.
No,
is a
hold
child,
on. Let me
you know.
lay my plan because I don't want that
Sure.
to get out of context.
Clip that, please.
Yeah. And so like I wholeheartedly agree with it, but my whole thing is I just there has to be some kind of preventative measures that we take, or else the cycle's gonna continue, because we all agree it's bad, but the cycle of it continuing, it's almost, and it almost leads me into my next question for you, is because the cycle of it continuing, because we demonize it so bad that we don't have any outreach. A lot of our laws and a lot of our crimes that we always deal with the blood and not the reason why we're bleeding. As technology evolves, how have you been able, or what are some of the different challenges you faced as technology is evolving in your investigations?
Well, in terms of technology, and all those points you raise are important. In terms of technology, again, we used to just have decoys in 2 different spots. Now there are hundreds, if not thousands, of places where guys are approaching children. And you can't have a decoy in every one of them. So if we do a sting operation in mid-Michigan or Florida or Ohio or California, you're getting a tiny percentage of the activity that's out there. And to your point about not doing enough to help people who might offend, that's true. The demand reduction element of this crime is difficult. It's not like the drug problem, where we can decriminalize some drug use and get people help to get off the drugs and to beat that addiction. Here, the demand is hard to reduce. And so the best solution, I think, based upon my experience, is education and the protection you put around your child by starting to educate them and have that conversation at a very early age that, look, you're going into a place where you don't know everybody. If you don't know them in real life, you don't know them on the computer. And there are adults out there who will try to trick you. And kids don't like to be tricked. And that's where the conversation starts. Because these guys are very good at grooming. When I was growing up, don't talk to strangers. Good advice then, good advice now. But the problem, of course, is that the guy who's a stranger on Wednesday is so adept at grooming. And I read these transcripts. I reread them for the podcast. And immerse myself in them. And it's almost like a template. These guys are so good at breaking down the traditional barriers between adults and children in society that they start to form bonds and friendships, and they find the vulnerable kids. We had a woman who wrote to me on the podcast. I interviewed her just day before yesterday. She was in college, and she's watching reruns of To Catch a Predator online, taking a break from writing her paper. And she sees a guy. He said, "Oh my God, that's Eric." This was in 2015. In 2009, Eric, posing as an 18-year-old, met her online and had sex with her when she was 16. He was actually 23. And she says, "Oh my God, this is that same guy." And the sting was done in 2006. So at the time he convinced her to have sex, he had already served a year in prison, was on 5 years probation, and a registered sex offender, posing as an 18-year-old to convince a vulnerable child who was homeschooled and had no social life to have sex with him.
Mm-hmm. What about the opposite direction? Has there ever been a woman in your experience or on the show that has tried to lure like a 15-year-old guy?
We haven't seen it in any of our investigations. In 19 years, we've seen talk of it. We've seen guys try to use it as a ruse. My girlfriend and I are coming over. We've never had, in all that time, a female predator service in our investigation. And the therapists and the experts tell us that it's because when it comes to female predators, you're more likely to see the teacher-student scenario. Female predators don't like the anonymity that male predators sometimes thrive on.
I'm just speculating, but I would imagine that like a woman, it'd be easier for, say, a 35-year-old woman, if she wanted to sleep with a 16-year-old guy, it would be easier for her to do that with somebody that she knew in real life that was around her, as opposed to a guy that would need to go through this whole like creepy secret thing to do it with a stranger.
We did a story for True Blue and people can check it out at watchtrueblue.com, TRUBLU, on our news magazine there, True Crime Nation, where a woman in her 20s was posing as a teenager, 16, and was hanging out with kids in the state of Portland, and convinced this kid at 13 years old to run off with her. Sold his cell phone at a kiosk in a mall, and the mother is apoplectic. Where's my boy? He went to this party and he's never not shown up before, and he's with this girl, older girl, who's like 24, and he's 13, having sex with her under an overpass, living with homeless people in Portland. Now, obviously, she's not right, and certainly not typical of all female predators, but it happens.
That would be a wild twist if that happened on To Catch a Predator at one
Oh
point.
yeah. I mean, it's. I'm not ruling it out, but I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
I think the 16-year-old boys tend to not see themselves as victims in a lot of the cases.
Sometimes.
Yeah, but in this
not.
case that I just referenced, this
Yeah.
13-year-old boy, and I got a chance to chat with him a little bit because I interviewed his mom. He's going to have issues. 13 is 13.
Yeah.
And we see comments. We put a clip on TikTok, as everybody does, and it generates a lot of attention and leads viewers into True Blue. And you see some of these comments, oh, it was the best 3 days of his life. He's 13. We don't know how this is going to impact him down the road, what else he saw, what he might experience or suffer from psychologically. I mean, that's a lot for a 13-year-old kid to deal with, whether you're a boy or a girl.
Guys like to, and it's almost like a masculine thing for men to be like, man, if I was 13 years old, I would have been having so much sex. That would have been awesome. It's more of them talking about like how they wish their past self had gotten laid more often, and not the reality of
or
like
their current self.
or their current self. Yeah. And not the reality of like, if you're a 13-year-old and there's a 40-year-old having sex with you, that's going to just destroy your entire life, regardless of if you're a male or female.
It changes your sexual experiences. It changes how you look at sex. It changes how you feel about sex, and that influences everything about you. And so I that shit bothers me so much when dudes do that shit, because like you otherize it, you know what I'm saying? And then it makes men like pack away this pain that they're not supposed to have. Like if you felt vulnerable at one point, you was like, well, didn't that feel good? Like, nah, fam, like that shit, like you were taken advantage of. You know,
Right.
like I know a couple guys that had gotten molested when they were kids and they were boys, and I know a dude that was molested by men, and I know a dude that was molested by women, and their experiences were very different, but like he opened up about it, the one that was molested by women, and it's just like, you're vulnerable, like to be taken advantage of at a vulnerable place.
Your mind isn't fully formed at that age.
100%, yeah, 100%, and it's I hate that notion.
Yeah.
I super hate that notion.
I know Billy's got some questions he wants to get to. I'm going to let Big T ask a couple as well in a second here. But we talked about this on the show a couple weeks ago, because in your situation where a guy would show up to the house and you can see the realization creep over his face that he has fucked his entire life up, the rest of his life, everything that he's got going with him. Like you mentioned, a rabbi one time showed up. In that situation, even though these guys came over to do the worst things that you can imagine, is there a small part of you that is like, that finds it hard to watch a person self-destruct up close that much?
It is, especially when you have somebody who's younger. And I try to take a different tact with somebody like that. I mean, if a 19-year-old shows up to have sex with a 12-year-old girl, I mean, that's disturbing. But he is 19, and he can tell me the whole story and everything else, and I'll take a different approach to that person because, he's a younger guy. He's not fully formed yet, perhaps. But, should he get away with it? No. Because at the end of the day, what's the difference between the danger posed by a 19-year-old man and a 39-year-old man? It's the same danger to a child. Now, the criminal justice system should probably treat it differently. He should get help and therapy, hopefully never reoffend. But just like the law enforcement community and the courts and the judicial system would treat him differently, I treat him differently too in that moment. I mean, there's no great glee or, high-fiving or anything after somebody comes in. I mean, there's a sense of accomplishment in terms of, we exposed somebody.
Yeah.
Who was a bad guy. We had a guy who showed up in Ohio, did the interview, talked to him, admitted he'd been arrested before, gets arrested. 2 weeks later, he's in a county north of where we were, in a hotel room with a 14-year-old girl after talking her into having sex, videoing the sexual encounter. 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's pathological.
What should happen to that guy? And he's in his 20s.
Yeah, that guy is so far gone that
Right.
there's no hope for him. I was just thinking, like, on a human to human level, like you can look at somebody and know this guy is a bad person. They do things that ruin people's lives, and also seeing them completely fall apart. That might make for a couple of tough conversations with an individual.
They are tough conversations, and we try to, it's all about being, I think, transparent in your methodology, right? When we first did the predator investigations, there were those in the traditional journalistic community that thought we were pushing something too far, that maybe we had crossed a line because we worked too closely with law enforcement, or that we were too graphic in what we were showing. But hey, it's reality. Are we going to bury it? Are we not going to be investigative reporters all of a sudden? Are we not going to use our enterprising techniques to expose this? No, I'll take that criticism all day long, because I think at the end of the day, we created a dialogue and an awareness, and we continue to do this that didn't exist before.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look, if the problem's over, then nobody's going to show up. And that hasn't happened in 19 years.
And it won't.
It's not.
It's good to continue.
So have you ever, one quick question before we get to Big T.
Sure.
Have you ever felt scared in a situation where, like, yo, this dude might have done something to me, because like you never know what they packing.
Yes, to answer your question, but we have as much control over the situation as you can possibly have. Law enforcement is there nearby. We have the ability, and law enforcement has the ability to do background. If there's a question about somebody carrying a pistol, or somebody has talk online about, I never go anywhere without my sniper rifle, they're going to take that guy down before I get to him.
Yeah.
So it is, look, part of the reason why people are so interested in this and follow these stories, and the reason they're so compelling, is because it's edgy, right?
Yeah.
If everybody could do it, it wouldn't be that unique. And we have forged the relationships with law enforcement that nobody else has.
Yeah,
but
yeah, the line between journalist and superhero.
Well, I don't know.
You are kind of
only in my own mind,
like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but like Chris Hansen the pedophile.
Well, it's funny. So, my older kids are in the business now. I mean, one's a reporter down in Orlando, and one lives in Brooklyn, and he does television and film production behind the scenes. But when they were in high school, it was no big deal to have a dad on TV, because they had, kids whose dads were professional athletes and shipbuilders and Wall Street titans and everything. But when South Park did a Chris Hansen Predator parody, suddenly I was the cool dad. That's when there was this crossover into.
Did they try to get your voice for that, or did they reach out?
They don't do that. Simpsons will do it.
Yeah.
The other shows will do it, and you can record it. It's fun to do, and you get the swag. But South Park just does it. They don't tell you. I mean, I was literally on assignment on a different story on the West Coast, and I get a text from one of my agents that says, South Park's doing you tonight. It's pretty funny. And I said, well, okay, in 3 hours, because of the time change, I'll watch it. 23 minutes later, it's taken a dark turn.
So did you like it? Did you?
It was fine. Look, you harness this stuff in pop culture to benefit the mission, right?
Mm.
And if people aren't talking about you, or they don't know who you are, what you're doing, then you've either retired and aren't doing it anymore, or you're not doing your job. So you have to, without exploiting yourself, without going too far, you have to take advantage of those things when they happen.
Yeah.
It's like if we're covering a murder or any other event, I get access because of the Predator investigations. It's just pure and simple, because law enforcement respects what I've done.
Yeah.
Unless you're the cop, Todd Baracco, who I busted in mid-Michigan one day.
Yeah.
He doesn't have that much respect for
You
me,
use the fame for good.
You
Continue what you're doing.
do,
Yeah.
right. And at all levels, not just the Predator, the takedown investigations, but the other things we're working on. And we've got some really compelling enterprise documentaries. I mean, at least a dozen. The sextortion. This boggles my mind. You talk about kids and being victimized and vulnerable. It's epidemic in our country, where scam artists are getting adolescent boys to send sexually explicit pictures thinking they're sending them to a hot young girl. And then they try to extort them. And these kids don't have any money. They're getting $100 or $200 or what little money they have. And they threaten to expose them to their family on social media. And these kids are killing themselves. 16, 17-year-old kids who are great students, athletes, and they're so afraid to tell their parents they screwed up. And the parents wouldn't care at the end of the day. Grandma's not going to see the picture.
Yeah.
You know, these are con artists a half a world away in West Africa. And literally, we're sitting at the San Jose, California Police Department doing an interview with a mother who lost her son, and the cops and detectives who investigate this. They have 4 reports of sextortion while in the 48-hour period that we're sitting there. There's a...
Bruh, I've had 4 texts. I've had 4 texts that I've blocked each number that like, hey, how you doing? I was like, who's that? I don't got this number. Who's this? And it was like spread out for like 2 years.
Yeah.
But it's like, I was like, who's this? And they'll be like, Anna. I'm like, I don't know. I do know Anna, but like, Anna so and so. They're like, oh, you don't know. And then they'll send a picture of me, and it's like this, like, woman, and I'm like, bro, bye. Like, but I'm like, I've never seen this con before, but like they lure you in to try to like. I've never seen it. This one's kind of new to me, but I've been blocking the shit out of them.
Yeah, but this is going on all over the country. I mean, and now it's gotten so bad that they're trying to extradite these guys from the foreign countries where they're working.
No, it happened to one of my friends in college. Yeah.
Oh, you get the email that says like, "Hey, I accessed your webcam." And...
No, they basically go through Snapchat. They start snapping you and being like, "Yo, I got your Snapchat at a party the other night." Then they start sending pictures of, an OnlyFans girl's nudes that they bought, and then they think it's a real person. Like they even like have the person's Facebook, where they hack a girl's iCloud and make you think it's actually them. Then they turn it on you and be like, "Hey, we got your dick pic."
I'm so glad I don't use Snapchat.
That's elaborate, bro.
No, they're like,
yeah, but this is going on.
on.
This is epidemic. I mean, we're literally going to North Carolina, or South Carolina rather, in I think like 10 days to interview a state senator, a state lawmaker, whose son committed suicide, and he introduced legislation to make it easier to go after the bad guys and to create education. And again, it goes back to the awareness and educating your kids about predators online. It's the same thing. It's like, look, if you get tricked into doing something, come tell me about it. I remember at the very beginning of the predator investigation, I had like a dozen middle school kids all, sitting on risers. I said, show of hands, how many of you guys have been approached by an adult online and it made you feel uncomfortable? It grossed you out? All raise their hands. How many of you told your parents? Looking down at their shoes, they're kicking each other. 1. Why not? We're afraid they're going to take away the internet. We're afraid they're going to yell at us. And that as a journalist, as a parent, I just had one of my boys got married a couple weeks ago, presumably at some point a grandparent. That struck me.
Yeah,
you got to keep that line of communication open between parents and adults.
Because the reality is, as a parent, if your child told you something like that, you'd probably be like, "Good job, thank you for your."
Yeah,
I trust the way that you're using
buddy,
the internet now.
Thanks for telling me.
Yeah,
we're gonna fight this bad guy together.
Yeah, you did the right thing. That's like, I know now that my child will let me know if they're getting.
Do you think any of those parents whose kids killed themselves, and in those interviews where I sat through these incredibly emotional conversations, do you think any of them would have really grounded their kids or taken away their cars?
Yeah.
Or do you think grandma was actually going to see any of that stuff? No, it was in the moment. And because their adolescent brains couldn't get around it and see past it, and because these kids are so attached, their egos are so attached to their online persona. What are people going to think of me on Instagram or on TikTok? Right? It's become woven into the fabric of our very being.
Yep.
And these kids can't see past it.
Yep. Big T, I want to let you cook for a second.
So the one question I want to ask, I don't even know if I want to ask it now. This conversation's been so serious. Obviously, what you do is very serious. But are you aware that you're a meme?
Yes, I am.
And does anyone ever recognize you from that, having no idea like what you do on TV or anything like that?
I think most anybody who recognizes me knows about the TV part of it. And, but you do hear from young people, you do come across people walking down the street who only know you from YouTube and social media, you know, who have no idea because of the exact thing you mentioned that, you know, I started out as a local reporter in 1981 and have been doing this in one form or another ever since, you know?
So that was actually something else you mentioned, maybe doing a cooking show in Italy or something like that. If you went back to 1981, what did you want your career to look like? Because obviously this isn't something that everybody envisions their career.
Right. I wanted to be, you know, a major market reporter. I mean, I thought at the very beginning, if I could be a reporter for Channel 7 Action News in Detroit, Michigan, what more could you want out of life? And I was very fortunate to not only do that, but to go on and work at the network and to have my own network now and to be in syndicated television and do a lot of different things, executive produce documentaries. And so I'm very fortunate. I had no vision of how the industry was going to be today. I mean, you know, when I took a computer science class at Michigan State University, we couldn't figure out how this could possibly apply to our typewriters and writing a story on shorthand and getting on television. I mean, what's this all about? I mean, the difference between when I started as a television reporter and my son, I mean, it's a whole different world now, you know, and I'm very fortunate to have just had the opportunity to grow with it and to have this sense of curiosity, you know, and the ability to not realize there's anything I can't do. You know, people always say, oh, how did you get there? I said, well, I'm too stupid to realize that, you know, that I can't do it. Yeah, so don't put limits on yourself, I suppose, and be curious.
I'm sure you're familiar with Carl Monday. Do you know Carl Monday from Cleveland? He was an investigative reporter.
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
Carl Monday, he had a segment that came out. I looked it up. I think it's 2006. And he did an expose, for no better term, on the pandemic of viewing online pornography in Cleveland area public libraries. And they set up like a sting camera, and they caught this kid that was like looking at porn in a library. And then Carl Monday approached him on the street, much less tactful than the way that you conduct your business, and was just like, "Hey, we caught you jacking off in the library." That was like, that was the precursor to Catch a Predator, without without all the packaging around it and without the greater mission statement behind it. I just didn't know if you were familiar with his work.
I know the name, yeah, and because I'm in our studio is in Cleveland, so I'm familiar with Cleveland media. Yeah.
On the topic of pornography, there's been a lot of studies saying that the rise of pornography and the widespread access to pornography on the internet has reduced sexual crimes. From what you described earlier, you don't think that's sort of happened to pedophilia. Do you think that these pornographic scenarios are causing more, not regular people, but exposing people to fantasies that they may have never thought before?
I think that's a possibility. I think for some people, having access to porn online has prevented them maybe from seeking out certain sexual pleasure in person. But more often than not, and the studies will show, I think, that there is a link between the viewing of pornography, especially when it comes to child pornography, and offending. And that at some point, the predator, blurs this line between fantasy and reality and needs to fulfill this fantasy, and they act out on it. So I think when it comes to child porn specifically, I think there's more danger of creating a predator who acts out than in preventing one from acting.
Because I've heard some people talk about like AI could help with it, where they like generate fake movies with fake people in it. But I tend to agree with what you're saying, which is like don't put that out there for anybody to see, because then they'll be more likely to actually take those urges and act on them in real life.
Well, look, I think adults viewing adult material is adult business, right? As long as you're not hurting anybody. The problem is when somebody who's predisposed to preying upon a child views, the abuse of a child, and every viewing of child pornography is the victimization and re-victimization of a child. Make no mistake about that. that person ultimately will, in all likelihood, offend or try to offend in real life.
Billy, you had something bigger in mind for him, didn't you?
What do you think of the whole Epstein and this idea that there's a vast network of pedophiles across government, corporations?
Pizzagate.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a vast network. I mean, obviously, Epstein was an evil predator, right? And he got a pass because he was, the first time around, because he was wealthy and because he was politically connected. And because his lawyers were able to create this image of, okay, it's icky, but the girls are of age to give consent. And yeah, he took advantage maybe of some who were from, meager means and paid them. But that's as bad as it got. Well, that wasn't as bad as it got. It was human trafficking. It was child sex trafficking. It was all bad stuff. And I was digging around in the Epstein story around 2015, and it's one of my career regrets is that I got busy and unfocused. I chased around some other shows I was doing and some other things. I sort of set it aside. And the lesson here is that the Miami Herald stuck to it.
Yep.
And kept chipping away. Julie K. Brown and her team at the Miami Herald kept at it and at it and at it against a lot of adversity. And without that reporting, Epstein doesn't get prosecuted federally. And the U.S. attorney at the time here in the Southern District of New York in Manhattan will tell you the same thing. Yeah,
because he got a cushy deal because of the political connections, and there's speculation that he had CIA connections as well. Or
I don't buy the CIA. Look, he was good at corrupting people. So if you didn't know the truth about Epstein, right, and say you're a single guy with money, and some guy invites you who also has money, invites you to go on his jet to his island because he's got girls there, you might take a look at that without knowing what was really going on. But once you figure that out, you should get the hell away from there. And the problem was he was able to coax these people and lure them. Why is Bill Gates meeting with Epstein?
Yeah.
Why is Clinton on his plane? Why are a lot of people associated with him? Well, maybe for a minute, there was some legitimate investment interest or philanthropic interest. But at the end of the day, he was a bad, evil predator.
And once he gets you in a compromising position, then you will do whatever he says.
There were pictures in that safe when the FBI raided that townhouse.
Yeah, and then they leave
40 blocks from here.
And then they come back, and then the safe's empty. He definitely was very good at getting blackmail on people.
And he had dirt on people. There's no question.
Yeah.
But so, for example, Ghislaine Maxwell gets convicted for trafficking.
Right.
But no one got convicted for getting trafficked too. So there's a whole host of people that might be compromised in various levels that might be worth hunting down if you're a pedophile hunter.
Well, yeah. I'm not done with the story, by the way. I'm just saying that in those early stages before he was indicted federally here in New York, there was more work to be done. And we honestly tried to set up a sting in Manhattan. And the levels of security were such that it was impractical. I mean, but I took a good run at it.
You tried to set up
we tried to figure out a way to run a sting on the Epstein child trafficking ring, sex trafficking ring.
That would have been incredible.
It would have been incredible. And it proved too difficult. And again, a regret of my career. Who knows whether it would have worked or not? Who knows whether you could have gotten past all the levels of security? But I spent a lot of time then and then afterwards reporting on this. I've got some stuff that's not been reported yet. I've got some people who I'm still trying to get to speak publicly. I mean, the reporting on this is far from over as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I mean, just imagine if
if I get whacked out here on 7th Avenue, you'll know why. After saying
let me know if
that'll be a conspiracy.
Let me know if you need a bodyguard to run interference, man.
Yeah,
I'm down to go on some missions.
I'm down.
Billy will be your bodyguard. I'm just imagining the scene To Catch a Predator where you're sitting at the kitchen counter, and then Bill Clinton and Donald Trump walk in together, just fresh off the golf course, and they see you and they're like, "Oh shit!" that would be some all time stuff if you got that one. But it's not over yet. We're still working on it. That's good. It's good to hear. Big T, you got anything else?
I think that's it.
I got one more thing.
Okay.
Sure.
Really quick. Pedophiles, when they get incarcerated, they tend to face a lot of violence from the general population. Do you believe they deserve an extra level of security because they're sort of a persecuted class in that environment?
What?
Persecute is a hard.
I think that was the wrong word. That was the wrong
That's
word.
a horrible question.
They are.
I see where you're coming from. I'll tell you a story.
Do not-
In that-
do not.
I found out years later. So the David Kay, the guy
Yeah.
who's a rabbi, right,
Yeah.
shows up in the Herndon, Virginia sting, gets convicted, a bench trial, a judge trial, a federal court, and they took a chance saying, oh, the judge would say maybe it was a sting or maybe he got entrapped or it wasn't really. The judge went the opposite way. He said, you're such an evil human being. I'm going to depart above the guidelines and send you away for 5.5 years, 6 years. So he's in prison. Now, the predator investigations are popular among the inmates. And I didn't know this in the beginning, but when they do the marathons, I'll watch it on MSNBC, or it used to. So he's in the TV room with all the other federal prisoners in his institution, and his segment comes up. And I know this from good sources in the federal government.
Oh, no.
And he starts to get nervous because he's up there on the screen and they're okay. And they put 2 and 2 together. And apparently he had a rough go for a little while in his particular federal prison.
I would imagine that's definitely one of the examples of this person should know better. If you're a rabbi, if you're that age.
Oh yeah, and he was working for an organization. There's no indication that he harmed any youth in this organization, but he was working for an organization in Washington, D.C., a very prominent organization that brought Jewish kids to Washington to learn about important political aspects of Israeli-American relations and that whole thing. It's a great organization. And again, there was no indication he abused any of those kids, but
But he probably would have if he had kept going.
He was
down
going to
this
abuse
road.
a kid that day.
Yeah.
He walked into our sting house for a 13-year-old boy like he was, with a spring in his step.
Yep. Did he have the Mike's Hard Lemonade?
He did not.
Who made that decision of it was always okay, make sure that they bring the condoms and the Mike's Hard Lemonade?
Well, in the course of the conversation with the decoy, anytime the guy actually brings something, it's
proof.
Evidence. It's intent. And so they used to say, bring something that was consistent with the age of the decoy. So in those days, today it's, White Claw.
That's so fucked up.
Whatever the sweetest, most childlike alcoholic beverages.
Mm-hmm.
We had a doctor showed up in Michigan recently on a sting, just a matter of weeks ago, 61 years old. And he brought Coca-Cola, Oreos, and red wine for himself because he had this fantasy. The decoy had braces and he was going to, get Oreos in the braces and do his thing. I mean, it's crazy. For an entire day, he's at his practice, sees 18 patients, and all the while he's texting this girl who's this decoy posing as a teenage girl, and he sends her a picture of his penis while he's seeing patients. He steps away to do this. I mean, but he brought the same items he talked about bringing, and again, that's just another element of the prosecution.
Yeah.
Do you have to get licensing for that? Because I don't. How many brands wouldn't want to be associated with? Because I know, when COVID first hit, in early 2020, the Corona, the beer, the stock took a dip because everybody was associating it with. So did Mike's Hard Lemonade take a dip, or did there was an uptick in it? And what does that say about?
I don't
us
think
either way?
we got a letter one time from the attorneys for Mike's Hard Lemonade asking us not to use their product in any further investigations. But,
Well, you weren't using it.
Yeah.
They were.
No, they were. I mean,
I empathize with the Mike's Hard Lemonade people on that one. It's
it's
for one episode. I don't know. Maybe do the Jack
give 'em a break.
Daniels
Yeah.
cocktail cans.
Bring some 3 cheese.
All right. Well, Chris Hansen, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
It was a good conversation. Thank you for your service. I think I can say thank you for your service. You've definitely through the course of these investigations, I think you've probably saved a lot of kids.
Well, I think we've raised awareness and we've created this dialogue. And if people want to check out the new investigations, we have you can go to watchtrueblue.com, Mac23, Macro23, and you can get a discount and sign up for
Okay,
us.
there we go. Macro23 promo code.
23. Yep.
go to True Blue. It's watchtrueblue.com.
WatchTrueBlue.com, and True Blue is TRUBLU. So, and when you get there, it's much more than the predator investigations. It's a whole network streaming platform of documentaries and films and a lot of unique content. And literally, you talk about sextortion. That's a documentary we have coming up. The Facebook Fiend, which will blow your mind. All those things come our way because people want me to investigate this stuff, and we are. So there are at least a dozen investigative series in editing right now.
All right.
And a whole bunch of new predator investigations.
Love it. Well, thank you very much for stopping
Thanks
by.
for
You can
having
also
me.
listen to the Predators I've Caught podcast, so check that out if you want more
Absolutely.
Chris Hansen.